Divine games, divine games, divine games, divine games, divine games.
What's good, family? It's Divine and we back with yet another banger video. Today is not just Saturday, but it's scary ass Saturday. You know, the day when we all sit together and we play scary games and watch scary videos together, you know what I'm saying? And with it being the month of October, it sets the mood just right every time. Today's gonna be another time when we watch some videos. The first video we're gonna watch is gonna come from YC Entertainment, and it's called The True Horror Story About the Tent in the Forest. I believe it'll be a banger. They make bangers just like the guys who from last week. But real quick, if you haven't yet, leave that like, comment, subscribe. Never forget to share with your friends and family so we can grow, because that's the goal. And also grab your snacks, man. Get your popcorn, get your drink. Let's get it. Let's see what this video is hitting for.
I grew up in Bradford, Pennsylvania. Have any of you ever heard of Zippo lighters? They're from here. A thick forest surrounds the town, along with most of the neighborhoods. My family lives sort of on the outskirts of Bradford. Of course, much like the town itself, our house was also surrounded by forest. If you took in the scene from our back porch, you would see nothing but sprawling trees for miles.
That'd be the worst.
I tell you this so you can gain a sense of isolation.
Right.
Out at my house, you could scream at the top of your lungs, and no one would come to help you. This happened back in the summer of 1996. I was 11 years old at the time.
Okay.
I had a childhood friend named Marty, who was the same age. Our fathers worked together and knew each other well. He would come over almost every Friday to hang out. Marty and I found ourselves hiking through the trees, as we often did. However, we were feeling a bit daring, and went further into the forest than we usually did. There was this barrier of trees that we would never go past, simply because I didn't know the area beyond that point. We continued past the barrier into uncharted territory. We eventually came upon a clearing. In the middle of this clearing was an old, disheveled-looking tent.
Look, I don't do walking through forests anyway. But if I walk through a forest, me and my homie, and we come across a TP, y'all got it. You already know.
Being the curious young men we were, we of course had to see inside.
At that point, whatever happened to y'all deserves. What are you doing?
I could feel the temperature around me drop. I'm no stranger to the cold, but this was in the middle of summer.
Oh, sir.
Even at my age, I could sense that there was something truly sinister inside this tent.
So you get closer to it.
A part of me was screaming to hightail it out of there, but my own curiosity pushed me forward. We both stopped just outside the tent, and suddenly, we were both too frightened to move any further. We were both frozen in place, staring at the open flap of the tent as it swayed from side to side. The sky seemed to grow even darker since we discovered this tent, and though we were standing directly in front of it, we could not see inside.
That's a sign.
What happened next is the reason that I still struggle with alcoholism.
What?
A dark hand slowly emerged from the tent's opening.
Oh!
It reached out to us, with long black nails protruding out from its fingertips. I'm not ashamed to admit that I pissed myself out of fear. The hand slowly turned and made a beckoning gesture with its index finger. And that's when Marty and I heard a deep, bellowing laughter from inside the tent. I don't remember much about what happened after that. I just remember me and Marty running for our lives, tearing through the woods and back to my house. I do have a vague memory of me briefly looking behind me as I ran, to see a tall, dark, and human figure standing just outside the tent.
Any demonic
Upon returning, Marty immediately called his mom to come pick him up. My mother asked us what was wrong, and we both explained to her that we saw some kind of creature in the forest.
Like, what the hell are y'all doing that deep
My mother
in the forest?
ultimately dismissed our claims, but led us in a prayer while we waited for Marty's mom to arrive. Marty never came back after that, and we sort of drifted apart.
Right.
Sadly, Marty began hanging out with the wrong crowd and began doing hardcore drugs when he was around 14. He ended up...
Hold on. So, this went from a horror story to a dare commercial? Okay.
hanging himself in his bedroom when he was 17.
Hold on, what?
As for myself, I suffered from severe night terrors and began doing hardcore drugs when he was around 14. He ended up hanging himself in his bedroom when he was 17.
Wow.
As for myself, I suffered from severe night terrors that tormented me for years after that day in the woods. I'm not going to get into what I experienced in my nightmares, but I will say that I became an alcoholic as a result.
Oh my gosh.
After moving far away and attending numerous AA meetings, I'm glad to say that I've turned my life around, and I even have a family of my own.
That's what's up.
I still visit Bradford every now and again to check in on my aging parents. Whenever I'm there, I always set flowers on Marty's grave.
That's crazy.
I'm still convinced that what we saw that day in the woods contributed to his death. Now that I have some perspective, I think what Marty and I encountered was a demonic presence. It followed us home and proceeded to turn both of our lives upside down. There were rumors of people worshipping Satan out there in those woods around the mid to late 90s.
What?
Perhaps they awakened something, and Marty and I just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Crazy. I mean, on a scale of 1 to scary, I think I put this like a 4 or 5. I don't really think it was that scary. I do, however, think it got super dark. So they think they seen a demonic entity. Well, the main guy, the narrator, said he's seen it. I'm not sure if his friends seen it. He said they kind of felt like they had a dark presence following them and kind of affect their lives negatively. I mean, homie passed away, and he's trying to link that to that. If that's the case, that's crazy. But at the end of the day, I don't want to be that guy. I mean, you go through a forest, y'all see a tent that's just isolated out in the random. And instead of getting away from it, get close to it. What do you expect to happen in that situation? What do you think is going to happen? That's a crazy story, though. Nonetheless, let's get to the next one. So this next one's called Nightmare at the Motel. And this is made by Animated Horror Flicks. This is yet another story that's animated. Another scary story. Hopefully, it's a step up from the next one. Enough of the small talk. Let's get to it.
It was the summer of 1991, at the old Glen Capri, which turned out to be the one dreaded summer I would care to forget. I had only just bought the place, and I hadn't gotten around to renovating anything yet, so the hotel was still pretty shabby and even a little creepy to some extent.
You got money.
The doors and walls hadn't aged all that well, and it didn't have any decent air conditioning, except for the overhead fans, which didn't do all that much against the sweltering heat.
Right.
Fortunately, though, I had already received some guests at the motel, and it seemed like things were off to a pretty good start for the season. I was actually getting ready to turn in when suddenly I heard the door to the reception close. I looked over to the entrance, but to my surprise, I couldn't see anyone leaving or entering. I got a strange, creepy feeling, which was suddenly elevated by the sound of heavy breathing that appeared to come from nowhere. It was rather faint, and it took me a minute to realize that it was coming from the other side of the reception desk. I was startled by the sight of a slender hand suddenly clutching onto the desk. It was only when I reached the other side of the desk that the whole situation became clear. It was an old lady in a wheelchair asking for a room.
Okay.
I immediately asked how she arrived at the motel, to which she responded by pointing to a yellow taxi parked outside. I initially offered her a room on the first floor, but she insisted on having a room on the second floor despite being in a wheelchair, citing that she needed a room with a view. After mentioning that I didn't have any facilities to help her get to the second floor, she simply brushed it off and assured me that the taxi driver would take care of it.
Okay.
As I handed her the keys, I could tell she was the kind of person that, despite her age, insisted on doing as much by herself as possible and was very stubborn. But she paid for 3 nights in advance, so I was hardly going to argue. Seeing the taxi drive off seemed like a good time to close up and try to catch up on a few hours of rest, while the other guests were sleeping, so I headed to one of the vacant rooms and turned in for the night. It was extremely warm that night, I remember from all the tossing and turning, before eventually falling asleep and having the strangest of dreams.
I hate sleeping in the heat.
I remember approaching one of the rooms at the motel. As I got closer, I realized it was room 209, the very same room where the old lady in the wheelchair was staying. The door was open and it felt like someone was pushing me forward or enticing me to come inside. I slowly pushed the door open further, which revealed the old lady sitting in her wheelchair beside the bed, staring right at me. She was frozen, trying desperately to express how afraid she was with just her eyes. I was feeling some immense pressure on my chest as I could sense a dark presence in the room with us. She kept looking briefly to her left as if someone was behind the door, but as I caught her glancing further to her left, I could tell it was something in her peripheral vision, almost behind her, that was causing her so much distress. To my horror, the door began to open by itself.
Oh!
I had never felt so relieved to know that something that felt so real turned out to be just a dream, but there was a residual feeling of intense anxiety that left me wondering why I was dreaming about that room and what it was that I saw standing in that dark corner. For whatever reason, I instinctively got out of bed and peered through the window, where my eyes were instantly drawn towards room 209 at the other end of the motel. Everything seemed normal at first until I realized that one of the blinds was pulled down slightly, as if someone was staring back at me. My initial reaction was that the old lady was also having trouble sleeping that night, but then I realized how absurd it was to suggest that an old lady in a wheelchair could even reach that high. It looked like someone very tall was peering through the blinds, and it gave me this chill that instantly stifled the heat in my room. Suddenly the gap in the blinds closed, which was followed by a strange silence. You know, the kind of silence that comes before the storm. I had a weird feeling that the night was far from over for whatever reason.
Would have been for me, I would have took my ass right back to sleep.
The loud knocking on the door spooked my senses as I contemplated for a while about whether or not I should open it. When it became clear that the knocking on the door was not going to stop, I reluctantly opened it and was surprised to find another guest accompanied by her luggage, urging me to call for a taxi right away. I asked her what was wrong, and she replied by telling me that she was awoken by loud footsteps and commotion from the room above. And then she began to hear foul language and cursing to the point she had to pack her things and abandon her room. I offered her another room, but she wasn't interested, and just insisted on a taxi to get as far away as possible.
You mind if I ride with you?
I kind of thought she was overreacting, but she seemed genuinely freaked out, as if she had seen a ghost. It was when I observed the keys to her room that I realized it was directly below room 209.
The best RPG on PC is seconds away. Download now on the Play.
The motel was practically empty at that point, and I didn't have an explanation for the noise, so I headed on over to room 109 to see if I could witness the disturbance for myself.
I'm okay.
I sat at the end of the bed, listening closely, and it wasn't long before I could hear footsteps and other unsettling noises from above, almost as if things were being moved around. I thought that perhaps the old lady had received a visitor during the night, which could explain the footsteps and the person peering through the blinds, but what was with all the noise, and why do it so late at night? The noise intensified and almost sounded like someone was being attacked, so I hurried upstairs and approached room 209, which I then knew without a doubt was the source of the uncanny disturbance. There didn't seem to be much point in knocking to compete with the noise on the other side of the door, and I could sense that someone might be in danger. Fortunately, the doors to the motel were very old, so I managed to force my way in, hoping to come to the rescue, but instead, I was introduced to a room plunged into darkness and silence. The noise had stopped. I could see the old lady in her wheelchair beside the bed, just like in my dream, except she was slumped over and showed no signs of life. She was cold to the touch and had no pulse, so I called the police, who later confirmed that she had died from heart failure. There were no signs of a struggle, and the only key to the room was on the table next to the window, so there couldn't have been anyone else in the room with her, so there was no suspicion of foul play. I told the police about the strange noises, but they refused to believe it was relevant to the cause of death, in light of the evidence, or lack thereof, for that matter. A few weeks later, I tried to put this whole thing behind me by making room 209 once again available to the guest, but every time I would prepare the room, I would find the furniture and other contents of the room scattered all over the place the following morning. The room directly below also proved to be uninhabitable due to the loud noises that could still be heard every night since the old lady passed away.
I don't want it.
I still don't have a valid explanation for what happened that night. I can only speculate and hope to never experience anything like that again.
I don't want it. I'm selling it. I'll try my luck somewhere else. I won't want to be nowhere near it. Oh. I'm cool. Ain't cool. Oh! I ain't gonna lie. That kind of made the hairs on my arm stand up, y'all. I'm cool on that though. That's your motel. Don't worry. You ain't gotta look at me like that no more. Hold on. Hey, that music though. Hold on. How's it drop? Hey. Okay. All right. Hey, this is definitely an upgrade from the video number 1. I ain't gonna lie to you. That story is crazy. Like, oh man, hey. And that jump scare at the end, they got me. I ain't gonna lie. I can't even front. Them hairs on your neck, they stood up right there when they showed them behind like that. Nah, but this was a dope story. This again was about animated horror flicks. It's called Nightmare at the Motel. Let's jump into video 3 real quick. Let's hopefully this next video is as good as this one. Let's get it. Okay, y'all. So this next one is called. Well, we're not gonna watch all 3, but this is called 3 True Creepy Horror Stories by IMR Scary Stories. They also make dope videos, as you see. Hey, check these videos out. Get these likes up for these channels. They make dope videos. Everyone I post so far, you'll get lost in their content. They all are amazing. So check them out. I'll be sure to have all the links to these videos in the description. We'll probably watch 1, maybe 2, and then we'll close out like that. But yeah, we're gonna get into it. I don't know what the first story is entitled, but we're gonna find out. Let's get it. Creepy man on the highway.
This happened a few months ago. I'm a 23-year-old female, and I had finally bought a car for myself. I loved driving around and listening to music. I usually liked doing this by myself. On this night, it was around 7 p.m., and it was winter time. On this particular drive, I took 2 of my siblings. My sister was 18, and my brother was 13. I took them along with me after their constant pleading because they were bored.
That first video, or
now,
that second
I'm a
video,
smoker,
got me checking around.
and coming from a South Asian household, women are not supposed to smoke. So I took these opportunities to smoke without worrying.
I just want to delete that. Creepy man on highway.
This happened a few months ago. I'm a 23-year-old female, and I had finally bought a car for myself. I loved driving around and listening to music. I usually liked doing this by myself. On this night, it was around 7 p.m., and it was winter time. On this particular drive, I took 2 of my siblings. My sister was 18, and my brother was 13. I took.
They're siblings? I mean, if you look at, I don't see it, but okay. All right.
Them along with me after their constant pleading because they were bored. Now, I'm a smoker, and coming from a South Asian household, women are not supposed to smoke. So I took these opportunities to smoke without worrying that my parents would catch me. The city that I live in has some bad areas. However, we lived in a quiet suburban area.
True.
So I didn't give a second thought about parking somewhere, getting out of my car, and lighting up a cigarette. I don't like smoking in my car. So there I was, parked beneath a street light, scrolling away on my phone. It was getting pretty dark, but I wasn't too worried about it, as I would visit this road frequently, and it wasn't too far from my aunt's house. As I was smoking my cigarette, I look up from my phone, and I see a man emerging from some bushes nearby. I didn't think much of it. I see people walking around here all the time.
How is he emerging from the bushes when there's no gap in that fence he's coming from? Okay. Hey, shout out to the DNG. Shout out to the hoodie, man. It's the swag.
This man was very tall, standing at least 6'4".
Looking at
He
me.
was on the opposite sidewalk. I assumed that he was just going to carry on walking, so I looked back to my phone. Until I looked up again and saw him standing in front of my car, staring at me. My sister, who was still in the car, must have been watching him as well, because she knocked on the window, telling me to come in.
Right.
I had already put out my cigarette and was making my way to the driver's side door, keys in hand. The man was still standing there, not moving a muscle.
I
got in and locked my door and breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that maybe I was just overreacting. As I put my keys in the ignition, I looked up to see where the guy was, but he was no longer standing in front of my car. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw that he was now standing behind us. He was taking pictures of my license plate.
It's over.
I slightly rolled down my window, and I could see his face a bit clearer now. He appeared to be an Indian man with a beard and a hoodie over his head, obscuring some of the features on his face. I asked him as politely as I could, "Excuse me, what are you?"
Mitch McConnell has spent his entire political career trying to stop people from getting affordable health care.
What are you doing? The man comes towards my window, but still kept his distance. He then said in a very aggressive tone, "Do you know who I am?" I didn't know if he was asking a rhetorical question or not.
Don't be taking pictures of my tags.
I have a lot of shit going on in my house. I don't need you parking here and watching me. You look real suspicious. Just randomly parking here with your two friends? What do you think you're doing?
Okay, he do got a point.
Fuck out of here.
Oh.
I chuckled nervously. I was trying to keep calm, but my anxiety was already halfway through the roof at this point. I didn't understand how I looked threatening in any way, as I'm a small girl who's been told that she looks like a kid. I was in my pajamas, and I was clearly minding my own business. Look, I just parked here to smoke. I come here all the time since I live close by. That's when the man got right up to my window. He slid his fingers through the gap and forced my window all the way down, screaming at the top of his lungs.
I'm pulling off.
Get the hell out of here.
Say less.
I screamed in terror and told him to stop swearing, as I had a minor in the back seat, and he was scaring him. He then screamed, "If you don't get out of here right now, I'll damage your fucking car." My adrenaline was running at full speed, and I was terrified. I didn't even bother putting my seatbelt on. I bolted out of there, and in my panic, I went straight ahead at a junction. It led me to a dead end. As soon as I stopped my car, I took the opportunity to try and calm down. My whole body was shaking. I couldn't even keep my foot on the clutch. My sister was quick to ask me if I was okay. But before I could even answer, I saw a pair of headlights coming right for us. It was the man. He was going at least 50 on a 20, and he almost crashed right into my car. But by some miracle, he just missed us.
What is going on?
After his car screeched to a stop, he jumped out, and that's when I realized that my window was still all the way down.
What are you doing?
I quickly tried to roll my window back up, but the man was too quick. He then dove into my car.
Oh no.
Half of his body was through my window. I screamed so loudly with his ear right next to my face that I'm sure I deafened him.
You better give him one.
He was trying to force my car keys from the ignition. But
why are you not
lucky
driving?
Stars that with my car, to release the key, you had to have your foot on the clutch, which I didn't. With one hand, I was pressing down on the horn of my car to make as much noise as possible, so I could alert anyone who was nearby. I scratched his hands away from my car keys.
Scratch his
and
face.
I heard my
what you
poor
talking
siblings
about?
crying their eyes out.
You got your siblings in the
My
car.
little
You better
brother
start
had
fighting.
no idea what he could do to protect me. I finally managed to force the man out of my car, and that's when he started screaming again. "I thought I told you to get out of here. Now I'm going to fucking kill you, bitch!"
No.
The deranged man then attempted to pull my door handle, trying to get inside, and that's when I floored it the fuck out of there.
Right.
I didn't care that my body was shaking like a fish out of water. My main priority was the safety of my siblings.
It should have been at the
I
beginning.
knew that we were making a loud commotion. I laid down on my horn, trying to get the attention of anyone nearby, but nobody came to help us. I managed to maneuver my way out of the dead end, and then went down a new street, into a totally different area, and I then parked. I knew that this was probably not a good idea, but I didn't see the guy following us. The three of us just sat in my car, sobbing away. This was the first time that anything like this has ever happened to us. I called the police, and I immediately wanted to punch myself in the face when the dispatcher asked if I had gotten the man's registration number. Of course, in my panic, I didn't.
Right.
I wanted to slap myself in the face.
Why?
Because I listened to a lot of horror stories on YouTube, and I always felt that they taught me how to handle certain situations. The dispatcher was very understanding, as was the female officer who called me the next day. As a woman, she understood how scary it must have been for me, and I cried to her as I recounted the incident.
It probably was terrifying, though.
Unfortunately, the cops informed me that there was no CCTV cameras in that area, so there wasn't really much that they could do,
But she had
especially
a phone.
with me not knowing where he came from. If he did in fact come from one of the nearby houses, I didn't know which one. The officer apologized to me, but it was really my fault for not mentally viewing important information. They made a report of my attack, so if a similar incident happens in that area, they can make the connection. The officer said that when I parked my car, the man was likely doing something illegal nearby, and that's why he freaked out on me.
True.
I personally think it was just some deranged individual who enjoyed scaring people who looked like easy prey.
Alright, that was deep. That was a nice video. Here goes video number 2.
I have been working at a department store for the past 2 years. Although retail wasn't something I wanted to necessarily do, it was much better than my previous job in the food business, so I was grateful to not have to touch food all day, and would take the world of customer service much more gratefully than the food industry. It was the middle of January, and store is usually quite dead towards the end of the day. Usually, the following month after Christmas is never really busy, due to people probably not trying to spend money after the gift-giving season, and the cold weather of the winter season in Canada never really helped the situation much. People not in the mood to leave the comfort of their own houses in the middle of a snowstorm. That meant that they put less people on shift, and I was alone in the fitting room. I work at a pretty big store, and alongside the weather conditions, that meant that the employees were usually spread out on the floor, not within close proximity in comparison to what they put during the busy season. None of us wore earpieces, as we did most of our paging through the speaker system.
True.
It was a Wednesday night, around 8, and the store closed at 9. I was usually put on the cash register, but often frequented the fitting room when they needed the help. It was a very quiet night, and I spent the first couple of hours of my shift helping organize the beauty section that is right next to the fitting room, or go speak to my lovely coworker who worked in the jewelry section, helping the few customers that actually wanted to try clothes on when they came by. There was a man who came to the fitting room with 2 dress shirts, and I didn't think anything of it. After all, he was nothing I've never seen before. Older, tall, kind of stocky, muscular, plain. I did notice that he seemed dressed rather nicely. A clearly expensive suit and a nice shoulder bag. I assumed he must have come to the store after his day at work. I counted the number of articles he was bringing in, as that was mandatory in order for me to monitor the flow of clothes and try to stop theft. Handed him a number corresponding to the number of articles he was taking in, and asked him politely to put the clothes back on the hanger, in French rather than English, because Quebec requires us to speak French first to customers. To which he replied with a simple, "No problem." I noticed he had a thick accent, although I wasn't and still not able to place my finger on it. I think it might have been Russian, but I can't say for sure. The man walked into the fitting room, and I didn't think much of it. I helped the other customers who came out of their rooms, counting the articles they came out with and matched it with their numbers, and hung them back in their place on the rack. A few moments passed by, and the man came out. Not really putting much thought into it, I took the both dress shirts from him. He didn't want any of them, and took back his number, said thank you, and turned to place the clothes on their rack. Usually, this was the point where the customer would just leave the fitting room. But when I turned around to go back to the front, he was still there. I asked him if there was anything I could do for him, or if he still wanted the shirts that I had just put away. The man smiled and looked at me, not answering, and I felt a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. He was looking at me as if he wanted to say something, and me, being the 5'4" girl who hates confrontation of any kind, just nervously laughed and started to organize the desk at the front of the fitting room entrance, awkwardly arranging all the numbers, although they were already in order. He asked for my name, to which I just looked down at the name tag I was wearing and repeated it.
She lied.
He told me it was a beautiful name. I laughed nervously, never knowing what to do in these sort of situations, and being nice to him was a part of my job in customer service. Besides, he didn't do anything wrong, just complimented me. I said thank you and looked away, avoiding eye contact. He then just stood there for what felt like 20 minutes, but in reality was just 3. He stood there as I helped other customers, and it was beginning to make me feel very uncomfortable. Not wanting to be rude, but also not wanting to subject myself to being uncomfortable for the rest of my shift, or however long he was planning to be there, I asked him if there was anything else he needed help with. Here's where I began to get scared. He then proceeded to tell me that he will be waiting for me at 9:30 outside the doors of our store. He wanted to take me out. Confused, I looked at him oddly.
That's not how it works.
How did he know that we finished at that time? The store closed at 9, and we usually spend 30 minutes cleaning up the store. I suppose that information isn't hard to guess, but it still felt weird. Why did he want to take me out? I once again laughed nervously, because that seemed to be the only thing I was able to do when uncomfortable, and politely declined, saying I had to get home and study. He laughed, taking a step closer towards me, and I instinctively took a step back.
Security.
He didn't accept that answer because he just smiled once more. I'll be waiting for you outside the door where all the employees leave from, in the truck alley. I'll be there.
Okay,
there was a door that employees exited the mall from because the normal doors usually locked around 9:15, and we always finished later than that. So we take the door that takes us in a slight alley where all the trucks go to drop off shipments from our store. Being someone who hates confrontation, and who doesn't do well with controlling my emotions,
as we know,
I felt myself start to tear up at his comment. No employee is allowed to mention the door we leave from. It's a company rule. Since we usually finish late, and the parking lot is dark, they don't want anyone to know where we exit from, as a precaution. I told him once more that I appreciated his offer, but I wasn't interested, and I had to continue my work. I politely told him to leave,
Get your hand off
when he
me.
put a hand on my shoulder, and I felt myself freeze up. I remember thinking, praying that one of my coworkers would show up to pick up the rack, or the jewelry employee would stop filling the cases and turn around. Obviously, with my luck, nobody did. He told me I was a pretty girl, and he couldn't wait to meet me in the alley at the end of my shift.
It's over.
He said he has a nice apartment and a cute dog, as if the dog was going to make me change my mind, and we could have a fun time. Desperate, I said I had a boyfriend, and he was going to be picking me up, hoping that would deter him, but he just laughed. He said my name, and then he told me that wasn't something that usually stopped him, placing his hand on my shoulder this time. I honestly really began to feel scared.
Call for security.
Myself to use the phone on my desk,
get him locked
shaking
up.
His hand off of me that I hadn't realized was gripped on me so tightly.
Oh no.
I paged the number for my coordinator, who curtly replied before I was even able to get a word in that she was busy with a customer, and hung up. Unsure of what to do, as the man was still next to me.
Call the
He
police.
followed me to my desk. I called my manager, who thankfully replied. When he saw that I was speaking with someone on the phone, he left the fitting room. But that didn't make me feel any better. I told my manager what had happened, and with good reason, she freaked out, telling me I need to report him immediately, reminding me that with people like that, I really have to be careful. She told me to call security, to which I did, and the security guard told me he had an eye on him through the camera. It was around 8:30 at this point, and I was getting ready to start my closing tasks, still paranoid about what the man had said. To be fair, I am a paranoid person, and I watch way too many murder documentaries, so I may be overthinking.
Nah, you ain't.
This sounded like the beginning of an abduction movie.
Exactly.
Honestly.
Believe your eyes. Believe what you've seen.
Not seeing the man anymore.
And what you
heard.
heard.
The security guard called me back. He wanted to let me know that the man had never left and was circling the store. I felt more dread than before pop in my stomach.
Get behind the desk and go do your job.
Didn't leave? Thankfully, he hadn't come back to see me. I felt kind of better for the fact that the security guard had seen him, so if anything did happen, there was someone who was able to identify him. Once again, overthinking. By the time the store closed and it was time to leave, two of my coworkers, Evan and Ethan, two boys who worked in the warehouse, made sure to walk with me all the way to my car,
That's what's up.
not letting me be alone. I appreciated it a lot. Although I didn't want to admit it, I was scared walking through that alley, and I was even paranoid he was going to follow me home. I took the extra long route to see if anyone was trailing me, to which he wasn't. When I walked through the safety of the door of my house and locked it behind me, I let go of a breath I wasn't even aware I was holding in. I make sure now to always leave the store using the buddy system. I never walk alone, and I always make sure I'm hyper aware of my surroundings. I never wear my name tag anymore. Luckily, nothing happened to me. And maybe I was overthinking the entire experience.
No, you weren't.
But I wanted to stress that even if your job is in customer service, if someone makes you uncomfortable, speak up.
Exactly.
You should not have to be subjected to this behavior at your work.
I agree.
Or anywhere for that matter.
That's a fact.
And to the creepy man who wouldn't leave me alone in the fitting room, let's not meet again.
Right. Oh, no. No. Ugh. That's crazy. When it comes to stuff like that, you know what I'm saying? That's like a real type of thing. Like, there's people like that are creepy and do things like that. And hey, when you're a female, you got to do what you got to do, man. Go with your gut. Especially when somebody like, hey, he touched all on you, saying what he's saying to you. You gotta do what you gotta do at that situation. I can only imagine what that's like. That's crazy. That's a wild one. That's more of like a scary story because of the fact that that's more like realistic and common, which is even crazier when you think about stuff like that. Wow. All right, but I'm gonna round it up for Scary Ass Saturdays. I feel like that's enough for us to have a nice little video made. In my eyes, video number 2 was by far the scariest with the whole jump scare and all. Like I said, this scare right here, that last story was scary just because it's kind of like relatable to people in real life. Like you see stories and like that all the time. The other 2 stories, they had their moments also, but if you ask me right now, number 2 was the best. This one was probably the second best just because of the fact that it relates to real life things. That's crazy. But real quick before we go, if you enjoyed this video, which I know you did, like always, leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and share with your friends and family so we can grow. This is a wild, scary ass Saturday. Hopefully, next week's is better. And y'all stay tuned for tomorrow when we do Silly Ass Sundays. Hopefully I can come up with a nice little video for that one also if I can't find the game. But until the next time, appreciate you all for watching. Take care. Yeah.
Hit the like, don't forget the like. Hit the like, don't forget the like. And subscribe button, and subscribe button, and subscribe button, and subscribe button.